Welcome to part 10 of the Firmament series. This is where we're going to look at just some early cosmology ideas from different cultures and see if the firmament is involved in these. So let's get going. Cosmological history of the firmament. So the firmament is not just isolated to the Bible. That's what we have to realize. We're going to explore other cultures and religions' views of the firmament in cosmology and see how it stacks up against scripture and the biblical cosmology. Let's see what the similarities, differences, things like that. So we'll start with just Hebrew cosmology here. So if you take the Bible at its word, literally, you end up with something to this effect right here. Now, this was, it's not really disputed among theologians only whether or not to take the scriptures literal. And we see this through the late Dr. Michael Heiser, who's a brilliant Hebrew scholar and Bible teacher. He was the creator of the Logos Bible software. And this is actually their picture. And they said that this is kind of what you see when you look at the Bible literally. So let's just explore here. We got the pillars of the earth. Now, this is not necessarily what it looks like, just the concepts are all here. You know, you have the earth, you have Sheol, you have the pillars of the earth, you have this giant water bubble it's surrounded in, you have chambers in heaven, you have the rakia with windows in there, then you have chambers in heaven, kind of like those storehouses, waters above the firmament, and then the sun, moon, and stars all operate within the rakia here, and then this kind of greenish space would be the atmosphere, kind of this layered type of creation. I would add, I guess, that the throne is sitting right here, and I don't know how they would kind of miss that in their Bible study there. But so that's the Hebrew cosmology. So this is kind of likely what they believed. So let's look at early Greek cosmology. You know, early Greek cosmology has it shifts and changes a little bit here, but there's some early Greek mythology is very similar to the ancient Near Eastern cosmology. There are various early Greek cosmologies, a little typo there, but they all share roughly five things. They all have a solid sky or a firmament. They have high ridges at the rim of the Earth. The sun is being close to the Earth when it sets and rises. The sun feeds on vapors from the Earth. The sun and moon are both small compared to the Earth, so they're like more local suns, sun and moon. They have a mountain, tree, or building at the cosmic center on Earth. It's kind of like maybe you call that North Pole. And I would say they're all geocentric, especially like Ptolemy, and it's not till later in the Greek culture that you start getting the heliocentric view. All right, so here's just a couple different pictures of just some Greek thinking. What do we see here? We see kind of a building at the center here of this earth. Then you have hell, purgatory. Then you have like air, fire here. Then you have different spheres. And then you eventually get up to and all these different like spheres, celestial spheres, house a different wandering star or planet. And then you have the realm of the stars up here, and that's where they're fixed to the firmament here. And then you have the crystalline sphere, or the hard sphere, like the firmament, I guess you could call that. It's kind of operates as the firmament. And then up there you have like the abode of paradise, and what you would be like the God's realm or whatever. Same thing down here. You just see like pillars of heaven on the outskirts here. You have the vault of heaven. Then you have the abode of the home of the gods on the top. Then you have the realm of the dead on the bottom. And then you have Earth kind of in the middle, kind of like that tiered creation. And then you have a small sun and moon that operate within this vault of heaven, and then you have stars that are resting in the vault of heaven as well. So this kind of lines up pretty closely with Hebrew cosmology. So let's just look at some Greek mythology. So we have Uranus was the primordial god of the sky and is often placed in a dome-like a position hovering over Gaia, the Earth. And then they separate, as with the, so then they were connected and then they separate, and that's what creates kind of like the firmament. And then they believe that their world was surrounded and encased within the great river Oceanus. So it's like surrounded by water as well. And then it's also kind of that three-tiered system, including the underworld, earth, and heavenly realms. So I just want to bring up some more Greek mythology about this guy, Atlas. So if you remember Atlas and how he was punished by having to hold the world on his shoulders, everybody remembers this guy. You may even seen a picture pretty similar to this. And this is, if you Google Atlas, you're going to get this. He's going to be this guy holding up a globe. But what if I told you that he was never supposed to support the world? This is one of those things that kind of got changed over time. So Atlas was the leader of the Titans in their war against Zeus, and after their defeat, he was condemned to carry the heavens upon his shoulders. And according to others, he was instead or later appointed guardian of the pillars which held the earth and sky asunder. Atlas was also the god who instructed mankind in the art of astronomy, a tool which was used by sailors in navigation and farmers in measuring the seasons. These roles were often combined, and Atlas becomes the god who turns the heavens on their axis, causing the stars to revolve. So you have Atlas supporting the heavens, guarding the pillars of heaven, and turning the heavens on its axis. He's never supposed to hold a globe. This is how it was, and then it got changed. He was never holding up the world, but the heavens or the firmament. So this is a more accurate picture of what Atlas's job was. He was supposed to hold up the firmament. So knowing that, then you start thinking about these other Greek myths, and it's like, did Icarus really fly too close to the sun? You know, is it closer than we think? Or did he travel 93 million miles away? It's just, once you realize that some of this stuff has been skewed. I mean, you know how long it took me to find this picture of him holding up the firmament? Like, forever. I had to go through like 10 pages of stuff, and I was trying to be very specific because every picture is of him holding up this globe. But that's not what it was. It got skewed over time, and we're going to see that with a couple other things as well. Actually, when we get down here a little bit further. So this is Aristotle cosmology. So this is geocentric and motionless Earth with expanding spherical sections until there's finally a firmament at the edge of space. There are also wandering stars and planets and the stars are fixed in the firmament, and it also denotes them being different than the sun. So you have this Earth in the middle, then you have air and fire. Okay, so that's interesting. And then you have, all the different kind of celestial spheres, which all the wandering stars are in. And then on the outskirts, you have the firmament. And then the stars are fastened in the firmament. So, pretty cool there. Let's look at like kind of Quran and Islam and their ancient cosmology. So in theirs, there are various solid firmaments with debate on whether or not they are domed or flat. So some other ones have kind of like instead of these rounded ones, it's just straight across and flat. And then otherwise, the cosmology is pretty similar to ancient Hebrew cosmology that we've examined in the Bible. So it's pretty close to that kind of very first picture that I showed you. There are invisible pillars which support the sky, like you see here. And then when we looked at our Enoch 18 verse, that's what he talks about is there's kind of like these winds that support the sky as the pillars. So, those are just interesting thing how those kind of line up together. Then you have the throne of God sitting in the highest of heaven, right here, right over the middle. That seems to line up with at least what the Bible says. And then you have stars fixed to a solid dome firmament. So you see them right here. This is the solid dome. And then you got the stars kind of hanging and fixed from that area. What else do we see here? We see, again, these celestial spheres, these 7 firmaments. And then in each one of those is a wandering star. And if you remember back in I believe it's our first or second session, we looked at like different apocryphal text accounts, and you think the Testament of Levi and the Apocalypse of Abraham, they each had like 7 firmaments. Now, I don't know if the Bible teaches that, but it's just interesting that it's not like they're the only 2 texts that have multiple firmaments there. And notice up at the top that this says the pre-Copernican universe. So this is prior to kind of like that 1500s when everybody's cosmology changed. Egyptian cosmology. So this would have been um, kind of the Israelites would have known as well. So first you have sky, or nut, and is connected to the earth at the edges. So this is this one here, this lady with all the star tattoos on her. And sky is seen as a solid canopy in which the sun, Ra, that's him, goes around in circles, just kind of like this. And we'll look at a better picture of this, a little bit cleaner version. And then the sky, seen as a dome, is rotating as well with the stars fixed in the sky. That was part of the Egyptian cosmology. And the air, Shu, is the invisible pillar that holds up the sky. That's her right here. We see those, if her name is air, then you have that pillars of heaven being the winds that hold up the firmament, like we saw in Enoch. Okay, let's look at another look at the Egyptian cosmology here. So it says, according to the cosmology of ancient Egypt, the world was once a formless, chaotic expanse of primordial waters. So what do we see in Genesis 1:1? Well, that's true. Okay, so maybe they're on to something. And it was personified by the god Nun. From this it is the first god emerged, among them Geb and Nut, who formed into earth and sky respectively, and gave birth to a multiple of other gods such as Osiris, Isis, and Set. The most important god in ancient Egyptian cosmology was Ra, who was the god of the sun, the giver of warmth and life. Every day he travels through the sky in his solar bark, and after the sun sets, it enters into the underworld in the domain of the god Osiris and has to undertake a perilous journey while being pursued by a monstrous serpent who threatens to devour the sun and return the world into chaos. So we have the primordial water beginning in ancient Egyptian cosmology, followed by a creation of sky and earth, what we could call heavens and earth, with all other phenomena being created afterwards, all other those gods. Boy, doesn't that sound kind of like the creation narrative? Now, this is where a lot of Bible scholars and people will say that the narrative in Genesis chapter 1 is simply giving the ancient cosmology back to the Israelites, but in a monotheistic view versus a polytheistic view, as when the Torah was given to Moses. So it would have been right after the Egyptian captivity, and the Israelites would be very familiar with the Egyptian cosmology, just as they were with the Egyptian gods themselves, because they started worshiping those gods in the desert. But here's the question you have to ask. This is like kind of a chicken or egg thing. Where did the Egyptians get their cosmology? Because it sounds very similar to the, albeit perverted, very similar to the biblical narrative. And so could they have just been perverting the truth and then God corrected it and saying like, okay, it wasn't all these gods, it was me. But what if that was still the true thing? Like, why would God say, hey, you know that totally false pagan cosmology creation account where there was all these other gods that did it? Yeah, it didn't really happen, but I'm going to say that I did that myself, even though that's not how things were created. I mean, I get the point that, I get what they're trying to say, because if you ascribe to our current cosmology and don't question it at all, then you have to say that there's something wrong with Genesis chapter 1 in the creation account. So my question is, where did they get their cosmology? And maybe it's, almost correct, but God has to correct it and say, no, it wasn't all these other gods, it was me. I'm the one that did this. I formed it out of chaotic primordial waters. I'm the one that created the firmament and spread and separated heaven and earth. I'm the one that put all these celestial bodies in the sky. It was me, and this is how I did it. Both could be true at once. It doesn't have to just say because Egyptian cosmology was very similar to the creation account, then that means um, that it's not really what happened. It was just, with everything pagan, it just gets perverted in a way that takes God out of the picture. Let's move on. Hindu cosmology. What we have here, we have a three-tiered creation. We have earth, then sky, then heaven. You have a firmament with a multi-tiered heaven. So you have the shell of Brahmanda right here, and that's kind of like your firmament structure. You have the sun, moon that operate in the stars that all operate within this earthly realm here. Then you have it surrounded by the great ocean. So all of creation is surrounded by this water. And then the edge is that solid shell, which we could call the firmament. And then the shell of water is covered with a shell of fire. So you get this water and fire dichotomy, which is, again, kind of some speculation with how the firmament was created in the first place, that combination of fire and water. And what you'll see here as we go through this, I was playing with AI a little bit, just kind of testing some of these theories out. And we were looking at like, hey, can you create a crystalline structure with fire, water, and maybe a little bit of energy or radiation, coming from God? And, AI said it was possible. Now I know that things, not the be all end all of everything, but, it had some good solutions to like, hey, yeah, this could definitely be possible to create a rigid crystalline translucent structure with just those materials. It would obviously take some, God to do it, but, like we couldn't do it. But I don't know, it was pretty cool to just see that this, thinking machine made those connections. Then you have like I already talked about, the sun, moon, and stars operating between the heavens and earth. So in the center here, you have this Mount Meru, right in the center of the world. And there's a lot of those ancient cosmologies, like I mentioned earlier, that have either a building, a tree, or a mountain at some central northern point to act as a conduit kind of between heaven and earth that kind of connects those two. It's interesting, you find like these old maps that have like this, it's called oh geez, I can't remember what it's called, but there's the claim that there's like a magnetic giant mountain at the North Pole area. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not. I'm just saying, like, even like we even have maps of like our Earth that will show some giant mountain at the center. Some older maps, not any recent maps. But it's like, where did those come from? And that just seems to be a common thing with all cosmologies and maps that are older. All right, Mayan cosmology. Three-tiered heaven, earth, and underworld, just like we'll always see with all of these. You have a multi-layered heaven in which there's an impenetrable layer where heaven meets earth. And then you have the collapse of the sky and their cosmology that created the deluge. So there was other apocryphal books that said that the firmament did collapse, or at least one of the firmaments collapsed, and that's what created the flood. But it's definitely possible that it was just windows of heaven opening to release some of those cosmic waters. You have what is noted. You don't really see it in this picture, but it's noted to have the four corners, likely represented by these different colors. So just kind of your cardinal directions there to say the corners, not necessarily like a sharp 90-degree angle. And then you have the sun and moon inside a solid outer structure. But what's interesting in this one is looks like most of the stars are outside of that solid structure, but it looks like we can see some stars inside the solid structure as well. Incan cosmology, again, three-tiered, lower, middle, upper levels. The world was surrounded by and in water, and they actually called this the Milky Way. So you see this like kind of river of water that was kind of surrounding it here. Their cosmology includes multiple levels of heaven, like first, second heavens, third heavens. And Hanan Pacha is the upper world was located in the firmament for them. Now, I don't know if that means that that's their sun, moon, and stars, or if it means some type of like a godly realm or not. But then you also have the sun, moon, and stars located, or that were local and located in the firmament area. So most of these early cosmologies have a more kind of geocentric, smaller, smaller universe type of cosmology, at least in the inhabitable parts. Navajo cosmology. So the sky has multiple layers to it. Uh, the Navajo people would create hughans as small replicas of their universe. So they're little tents. I should have put a picture up there. I know I didn't, but you can Google that word. But the creation of the hughans as a small cosmological replica would be kind of similar to the tabernacle, like a relook or recreation of a domed tabernacle, like I told you that Andy Hoy's book, The House of El Shaddai, has. Well, so if that's a replica of creation that we saw in the last session, and they make these as replicas of their universe, I just think that's like it's like where there's smoke, there's fire with some of this stuff here. And then the sky is either cone or dome shaped in their cosmologies. And there's a rainbow domed bridge, which marks the barrier between heaven and earth. So you have this rainbow domed bridge, likely referring to the firmament, and that's where separates heaven and earth. And then you have stars that are inside the solid structure, but then you have the sun and the moon that are actually outside the solid structure. So that's interesting. One operates within, one operates on the outside of that. Speaking of rainbow bridges, I want you to think back to your Thor movies or your Marvel movies. And if you remember the rainbow bridge for the Asgardians and the Norse people, that was this kind of looked like a like a long, rainbow that literally was like would transport them to the various realms. But again, this is one of those things like with Atlas holding up the firmament instead of the Earth, where the Rainbow Bridge, or also known as the Bifrost, gets totally misconstrued. Because if you look at the actual, if you have to dig deep for it, trust me. But if you look at the actual Norse cosmology and what it was, the Bifrost isn't some magical bridge that just teleports you to different realms. So let's just back up for a second here. And so there are 9 realms in Norse cosmology that rest in 3 different layers. So you kind of have that upper, middle, and lower levels. And in all of these cosmologies, like the inhabited part is always that middle level. It's never the like top or bottom layer. And then you have the Bifrost, not just being a passageway between Earth and the God realm, but it's a barrier and bowed like a rainbow, and that's the Rainbow Bridge. That's what that is. It's that dividing line between heaven and earth, or the godly realms and the earthly realms. This is just another example of how things get kind of twisted, and it doesn't end up being what they normally were. So that's that firmament. The Bifrost is the firmament in Norse cosmology, not just some rainbow bridge. And then it's interesting that so they're whenever Asgard gets destroyed, Ragnarok is what it's called. I couldn't think of the word. It's because there's an attack, there's a war, and then the Rainbow Bridge gets broken by the attackers, by the frost giants. So that, it's like, how does the bridge get broken? Well, it's because they have to break through the bridge in order to get to Asgard in order to attack them. So that's how the bridge gets broken. That's how it works in Norse cosmology. All right, so we had all those really cool pictures. Now we have this like line drawing because I couldn't find any cool pictures of this. But this is Chinese cosmology. Chinese had a couple different cosmologies, but I'm going to focus on their geocentric one. So translates to canopy heaven, the Gitian, or however you pronounce it. It has a fixed north pole and the heavens that rotate around, so kind of like a rotating firmament type of a deal. Um, the domed heavens, which would be the equivalent to that firmament, and then you have the sun, moon, and stars that rest inside that canopy, as you see here. Okay, that's just a quick one. So Freemasonry. So this is kind of a picture of Freemason cosmology here. So this is very interesting. Now, I cannot find anybody that can break down this picture. Like, I haven't found anybody that gives a detailed explanation of this. So we're going to do our best to do it. I mean, this is literally my interpretation of this. There's probably so much symbolism in this, it's ridiculous, but I would just be speculating on some of it. Some of it's pretty straightforward, but I would love to find someone that actually knows all the Freemason symbols that breaks this down, because not George Freemason down the road, but I'm talking about these 33rd degree Freemasons that are, I don't think are very trustworthy. And if you look at the history of Freemasonry, you can kind of look at my third part of my Nephilim video on this channel, but they, yeah, no bueno, up to no good here. All right, let's look at here. So we have a domed heavens in which the stars are fastened and supported by pillars. So you have the two pillars that support the firmament here, and then you have stars that are kind of fastened within it. You have a masculine sun and a feminine moon. So pater means father and mater means mother. So you have the feminine moon, masculine sun, and we get that verbiage in the Bible. You have a three-tiered system with ups and downs. So you have the inferius, you have the superius, and then you have the stuff in the middle. So there's three tiers. The sun and the moon are distributing their own individual light. Boom. They have the sunlight, you have the moonlight. You could say I'm splitting hairs there, but that's my interpretation. Now, this is very interesting. Up at the top, you have Aish Mayim. That means fiery water, which early church rabbis thought that that's how the firmament was created. You have fire and water together. Super interesting. And then you have the constellations. I know I already said about the stars in there, but you have the constellations too. So you look at some of these, what do you call those? Like astrological signs there that are within the firmament structure, supported by pillars. I already said that. So there's a ton here. So pause it on this slide and just kind of see if you can reinterpret some stuff there, or interpret some things there. But it's like, it just looks like there's a lot to unpack. I mean, I would love to find a video if of someone breaking that down. So I just wanted to include these because it looks, there are some firmament things. There are engravings that are around the 1500s to 1550s, so right before kind of the heliocentric model was introduced. So both of these include like visions of the firmament with the sun, moon, and stars being located in the firmament itself. So you see this guy kind of like peeking through the firmament. The sun, the moon, the stars are in there, and he's looking to whatever is kind of sitting outside of the firmament there. I know this says 1888, but that's when it was published. This is actually from the 1500s. That's what I found out. And then you got another one here where you have like an interesting, you have angels kind of on the four corners type of a deal. And then you have this like kind of fiery firmament layer. And then above there you have the sun and the moon and the stars kind of in that realm. And then you have what looks to be God right here right in the middle, smack dab over top of that firmament. Not necessarily biblically accurate, but it's interesting to see the thought processes of what people believed even back just in the 1500s there. So, all right, we're going to switch gears a little bit. I didn't have a great transition for this. These aren't necessarily like early cosmology, but we're just going to look at some different observations that we observe in the sky. Some what we call like visible phenomena. So I did a thought experiment with artificial intelligence. Just started using it the other day. I'm not a big fan of it, but I thought I would do it for this purpose. I had the artificial intelligence assume that there was a crystalline dome at some elevation above the Earth, up to including like 20,000 miles in altitude. And then I, didn't want to prompt it too much or lead it, but I said, if you have this crystalline dome made of these materials, you know, collaborating with a biblical cosmology, what phenomena could be seen in the sky from the perspective, terrestrial perspective on Earth? And the interesting thing is all of these things we're going to talk about, it actually brought up, I think, like 90% of those, saying like, well, if you have a crystalline firmament, you could see these, X, Y, Z, and it starts going through these things. So let's look at the first one, sun halos. So you see this big kind of circly halo thing around the sun. Now the explanation is that it's light refracting off of round ice crystals, and all the ice crystals in the air at this point are perfectly round to make a perfect circle. So kind of like water droplets or something like that. But the AI said that sun halos would be definitely something that would be possible to see with a crystalline firmament. Sundogs. So here's a picture of sundogs, and the scientific explanation for these is light refracting off of ice crystals. So you get the same explanation with the sun halos, but now it looks differently. So you get that same. Interesting. There's another picture of a sun halo, and interestingly, you can get that same effect if you look down here by shining light through a glass with water in it, and you get that same type of thing. And I'm not saying that's what it is, but all I'm saying is, there aren't any ice crystals in that cup of water because it's in a liquid state. But this was another one that was brought up by AI that said it would definitely be possible with a firmament. Now, again, there probably has to be the right atmospheric conditions as well. It's not like you should see that every day. Now, I'm not saying this is or isn't, so don't misunderstand me. I'm just saying, like, okay, let's pretend that there is one, and we see these certain things in the sky. Like, is that possible to see if there was a firmament? So we're kind of trying to, like, maybe straw man just a little bit here. Like, okay, we see this. Does that make sense? Is it possible with a firmament or not? Sun pillars. This was another one that was brought up by artificial intelligence. That's possible. So you see that kind of, pillar of sun coming up like this. So the explanation is that it's light reflecting off of rectangular ice crystals. So it's just, this time they're all rectangular, all perfectly rectangular, and there's no round ones in there. It's like, so what makes them all turn rectangular for this phenomena and then they're round for the other ones? I mean, there's probably an explanation for this. I just don't know. But that's another one that AI brought up is possible with a crystalline firmament at some elevation within 20,000 miles. So this was an interesting one. It's multiple suns. Now the explanation was it was light refracting and scattering off of like the hospital window. I guess this was taken from a hospital window in China. But the sun is the only thing that there's multiple of in that, so it'd be interesting to know why there wasn't like multiple views of something else. No, I'm not saying there's multiple suns, but if you did have a crystalline firmament, you could see multiple suns, or what we call pseudo suns, and we actually are going to dig up a Freedom of Information Act study done in Russia that talks about the phenomenon of multiple suns and pseudo suns. So they were trying to explore why there was that phenomenon seen in the sky. I believe this is pronounced Orioles. So these things also were mentioned by AI as something that you could see with a crystalline firmament, and it's kind of like this when you cover up that light source. This is kind of aura that's around it, and the scientific explanation for this is the scattering of light as it hits small particles in the air. So whether that be water droplets or dust or something like that. This one is an aureole of the moon. The one over here is the sun. This one is of the moon. So you see those different kind of like round round auras that are seen around it. And I was driving the other day, and I took a picture while I was driving, but it's kind of hard to see. But like as I was driving, I kept noticing that I kept having that same phenomenon happen on my window. Now it was cold, and that's what they'll say. It's usually these types of like during like colder times where you can see some of this stuff a little bit better. But I just thought that was interesting that, I wanted to add that in there, that I'm not just stealing random photos off of Google. Rainbows. I think we talked about rainbows before and had a couple cool pictures for you there, but we see multiple rainbows here. And then here's another good, like kind of almost a full circle rainbow that you can see from up above. And the explanation is round raindrops refracting and bending light through circular raindrops. So you got circular raindrops that are visible, or that refract the light into a circular shape. Okay. Now, if you had a round crystalline dome, artificial intelligence said that, well, you would definitely see a rainbow, and it said that it would act like as a prism, but it said the rainbows would always be there. Essentially, artificial intelligence said, but it would have to be under the right conditions in which they would be visible necessarily, and that would be kind of like after it rains and something like that. Now, I'm going to show you this next picture. I don't know the legitimacy of this, but they're just saying like the further like south that you look, you'll see that the rainbows are a little bit more arched. Now, this could definitely be just from perspective, like the further away you look. So I don't know for sure, but this is just kind of showing that, if you had a domed container, such as a crystalline firmament, according to our Genesis 1 text, the closer you get to south, you would have more of a graduated dome, potentially, like if you have some of these ancient cosmology setups. And that would mean that the further south you go, you would get a more, you get kind of like a shorter arch in the rainbow. I don't know. I just thought it was interesting to, why not bring it up in there? All right, crepuscular rays. So you see here the different light kind of shooting out like this. It almost looks like kind of heaven is coming down on you a little bit. So the explanation of this is that sunlight is scattering off of particles as it comes through the clouds. Because if the sun is 93 million miles away, then all light would have to come at a parallel angle to Earth. So if the sun is way over here, and this is 93 million miles space here, and here's Earth, if over a 93-mile distance, if one ray is angled anywhere other than like the 180 degrees straight, it's going to miss Earth by a long shot as far as its rays. So all the rays are going to be just parallel rays that kind of hit Earth. So then the question would be, if you're getting just parallel rays, how do you get these angles of sunlight coming down like this? So the two options are, you have a it's just when it hits those clouds, it just has particles and it starts spreading out. Or the other option is you have a closer, more intimate sun that's not as big, and then even at 3, 4, 5, 6,000 miles in altitude, that sun could still you still be able to see those divergence of those crepuscular rays. So we're just talking about different possibilities here. Like if there's a firmament, could it explain some of these things that we see? And so far we're saying it. It's at least theoretically possible that it could. I mean, you obviously can't experiment with it. Twilight colors. So this was a big one actually, that the AI brought up. It said that it would definitely. I don't know. I don't remember the explanation that it gave, but here's some different examples of some twilight colors that we see, all different kinds. So the explanation is that light scattering as it passes through thicker atmosphere, and it's interesting. This top right picture kind of looks like the what Revelation says about the that it was mixed with fire. So I don't know. It's just interesting. Like, uh, could that be referring to being lit up by the sun? And we did say that the Greek words being used could mean sunlight with mixed with fire. It's the same word used for that. So um, it could be that. It could be the result of a crystalline firmament and a closer sun as well. So just it's theoretically possible. We'll just put it that way. Twinkling of stars. Okay, so I'm going to put up a few pictures of stars that are zoomed in with a Nikon either a P900 or a P1000 camera. So it has the highest zoom possible in a consumer camera. But you see stars twinkling, and the explanation is that it's refraction of light through Earth's atmosphere. And when you see in a video these squiggly lines here, like in Venus, here, these types of things, or these ones here, um, the stars appear as if they're like kind of like rippling in water, similar to like looking at a shadow of ripples in a swimming pool. So we're going to look at that here in a second, but um, right here. So if you would watch these on video, it looks exactly like these, like ripples of water, of light coming through water and casting that kind of like a little shadowy thing. I'm not saying that's what it is, but the Bible does reference waters above. So I'm saying, like, hey, some of this cool stuff that we see in the sky, like, it's theoretically possible that it could be the result of the firmament and we're attributing it to something else. It's an interesting thought, is all I'm saying. So when I asked AI about this, it said that the twinkling of stars can be explained by the firmament. I mean, that's what I mean, and it says especially if there's waters above, it would be able to do that. So let's look at some more of these stars here. So this is a whole bunch of stars. They're all different colors when zoomed in on. I mean, we just see a white light when we look, but when you zoom in on there, like this one here. I've seen some of these stars close up with that camera, and this looks like they're spinning. It almost looks like a record spinning, this one. Then you have like these ones here that look like they're rippling through water. And then you have this one that looks like it's just like a plasma ball, and it's all spiky and stuff like that. I wish I had a video for it, but and then that reminds me of 1 Corinthians 15, chapter 15, verse 41. It says, "The sun is glorious in one way, the moon is glorious in another way, and the stars are glorious in their own distinctive way. For one star differs from and surpasses another in its beauty and brilliance." And these are zoomed in with 125 times optical zoom on these stars, and they each have a unique color, a unique twinkling design, and some look like light rippling through water, some look like spinning wheels, other look like flashing lights and spike balls. Um, and they're just all unique. And it's like that's what 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 41 tells us. It's like, the Bible seems to always be first on stuff. And if the world says it's wrong and incorrect, I think you need to reconsider. I mean, are you going to trust your Bible more than something else? And there's going to be all these famous people I hear talk, well, the Bible doesn't make scientific claims, and that's what they say. But like, what if it does? And what if we just have some things wrong? I don't know for sure, but what I'm saying is like, I think some of these things you have to reconsider, or at least entertain the possibility that some things are different. Transient luminous events, TLEs. So there's a lot of electrical events that happen way above a storm. So this is, you always think these are made up. You have these. So this is like the Earth down here. This is the storm cloud. So this is really high up here. And then you get all these like weird stuff that happens. And they're called different things like elves, gigantic jet, blue jet, sprites, ghosts, halos. These are real things that happen, but you don't see them because it's way above the thunderstorm. Okay, but it looks like, what is this weird electrical phenomena that's happening? Like, what is this? So here's an example of kind of where the altitude is, talking about like in kilometers. So you got 100 kilometers up here, and that's where the ionosphere, and it talks about the different spheres that are there. So the explanation is that lightning causes the disturbance in the magnetic field in the ionosphere. But I saw a slow motion video of this. There was someone up in a very high altitude plane that was trying to film this from afar, and it almost looks like this sprite right here, because this is the lightning down here, or down here. But it almost looked like because what they claim is that the lightning then causes this upward discharge. But I've saw on the video, when you do it in slow motion, they're using like an infrared camera, this sprite happens before the lightning discharge. It's almost like the sprite was the effect of the lightning. I can't find the video because it was taken down. I literally can't find it anymore. You're just gonna have to bounce. You're just gonna have to trust me. But when we talk about this ionosphere up here, the explanation for this this ELV, it's an expanding disk. It almost looks like it hits something and spreads out. And what they say it hits is the ionosphere. So there seems to be a lot of things that bounce off this ionosphere, unless you want to get something through it, and then it goes through it. You get to pick and choose. You want to radio to someone up in the what do you call it, the space station, you can. But if you want to radio to somebody on the other side of the globe, you have to bounce it off the ionosphere. It's like, how can you just pick and choose which radio signals bounce off one or the other? It's like so if something needs to bounce off the ionosphere, it does. When something doesn't need to bounce off the ionosphere, then it doesn't. It's just interesting. And doesn't the atmosphere get thinner? So the ionosphere was essentially created, like when they discovered it, because to explain how waveforms could travel very far distances without being shot into the vacuum of space. So, for instance, like if you're, here, and you want to send something here, what they say was like, well, it bounces off that ionosphere and then comes back down instead of being shot out into outer space. But that's what the ionospheres, that's when they discovered it. But then it's like, why do some things pass the ionosphere and some don't? I don't know. It's just, it doesn't make sense. And then I asked the AI about these, and they said that the answer was yes, within our hypothetical cosmology, because I made it just assume certain things about a crystalline dome. It said the crystalline dome could indeed act in a way that is functionally similar to the ionosphere in real-world understanding. So it's just interesting when giving AI everything the ionosphere does and everything that, and I didn't even ask it about the ionosphere. It brought it up. It said it would function as the ionosphere. I mean, I didn't even ask it to say that. It's just interesting. So we're going to go back to comics, and then we looked at those when we looked in Jeremiah, but once, I said, once you see it, you can't unsee it. So we already talked about these, but I want you to think about, so let's say the sun is not, let's play devil's advocate and say the sun is not 93 million miles away. It's more local. It operates kind of within that kind of firmament area, okay? So if let's say the sun is over here, and then there's a little hole in the firmament, it looks like the light's shining through, right? That's what the comet tail is, actually the light shining through the firmament from the blackness of what's behind it. Picture that kind of light source, and that it seems like if the tail is always away from the sun, it definitely is possible. Then I guess that's actually sunlight. The tail is sunlight coming through. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Just look at those pictures of comets here, and you're like, oh, that kind of does look like a light coming through that. Let's look at a couple more pictures here. Here you go. Just, is that a comet? Maybe. Is that an ice and dust ball? And these are just dust particles? Well, How many comets have we captured? How many comets have we landed on? How many comets have we zoomed in and actually saw an ice ball flying? We haven't. But, you know, scientists say that we know exactly what it's made out of just by looking at the light that it emits. Yeah, that makes sense. It's definitely ice and dust because of the light particles. You know, forgive my stupid ignorance, but like we see a light in the sky, so yeah, even though we can't see an object in the nucleus of the thing, we know one is there. Like that doesn't make sense. Oh, we can't see anything in that, like that bright spot right there, but we know what it is. Even though we can't see anything, all we see is a bundle of light. And it's like, you can't tell me you know that for sure. You can speculate based on wavelengths of light that come back to you, but you can't tell me you know exactly what that's made out of. That doesn't make sense to me. You know, these dusty old objects in the sky sure as heck reflect light pretty good. That's all I know. You know, I could be right, could be wrong. But I want to bring you back to what that Mishnah Berakhot 9 says. It says the stars would seem to open the firmament, and which dart like an arrow from place to place, or a star which seems to have a long tail. I don't know. Could it be one of those? Maybe. I'm just saying, like you entertain the idea. If you want to entertain the idea of a firmament, you have to entertain the idea that that's definitely possible. All right, star trails. There's only two possible options for star trails. It's either a revolving Earth, or it is the luminaries revolving in their fixed course around Polaris. Those are the only two options. So the question is, if we are spinning at 1,000 miles per hour, chasing the sun at 66,000 miles per hour, and hurtling through the galaxy, chasing the sun at over 600,000 miles per hour, and all the other stars and galaxies are doing the same thing, rotating, revolving, orbiting, and expanding and flying away from each other at insane speeds. Why, from the beginning of recorded astronomy, has Polaris never moved, and these stars have always taken the same course? So there were these things called the Georgia Guidestones. I don't know if you remember those, but they had a bunch of weird stuff on them, like weird type of like cultish stuff. But when you look through the little hole in the Guidestone, you would see Polaris every single time, never moved. If you look through that little hole in the Guidestone, Polaris was right there. But according to our heliocentric, ever-expanding Big Bang model, they should have moved at some point in history, like even a little bit. But they've always been the same places and rotating around the Earth in the same way. Now, this is another thing where I asked AI about star trails, and they said you would get the exact same phenomena if the Earth was still and the luminaries were moving, or if it was in the heliocentric model that we see now. So it says you can't tell for that. They'll use that as proof that we're in the heliocentric model, but the fact of the matter is you absolutely can't tell the difference. Earth could be stationary and the luminaries moving just like the Bible says. It's definitely like there's no proof one way or the other just from something like this or anything with celestial bodies moving around. It's impossible to determine that just from the celestial bodies, just from the observations. All right, so moonlight versus sunlight. So sunlight is hotter than its shadow. So if you're out in the sun, you get cool by going into the shade. There's the sun. And you have moonlight is cooler than its shadow. So you can actually experiment with this yourself with a laser thermometer. If the moonlight is just reflected sunlight, then why is it colder than the shadow that it casts? And the sunlight is a lot warmer than the shadow that it casts. So if you if you have a full moon and you see, your driveway is lit up by the moonlight and you hit it with a laser thermometer, it's going to be colder than if you set up something and it sits behind its shadow. And you can, try to eliminate all variables where you could take like a piece of wood and you can have half sticking out into moonlight and half behind something blocking it to cast a shadow, and you'll get about a 3 to 4 degree difference. And then if you flip that over so that they reversed positions, you'll still get that 3 to 4 degree difference. So it's not just saying like, oh, it was retaining heat from where it was before or anything like that. Like, you can do this experiment yourself. I encourage you to. So I also heard claims about decay is faster in the moonlight versus the sunlight, along with some other things, but I haven't confirmed any of those, so I don't want to actually just put those in there. But it's there definitely seems to be pointing to something that there's a dichotomy, like almost a yin yang thing going on with the moon and the sun. And then when I gave AI a theoretical cosmological model of a more intimate sun and moon that are the same size, it itself brought up the dichotomy of these things and how they could have opposite properties that play off each other in certain ways and work together to create like a balance. So, I mean, AI came with that, not me. I didn't prompt it with any of that stuff. Then we have about daylight versus sunlight because they're not the same thing. So the whole sky is lit up due to what's called Rayleigh scattering, where sunlight bounces evenly off of nitrogen particles in the air and scatters it, and you mainly only see the blue longer wavelengths, which is why the sky appears blue. So that's the definition or the explanation for that. Or you could have the crystalline firmament being lit up and illuminated by the sun, which appears as a sapphire stone in Exodus and Ezekiel. So I'm saying, like, you know, who knows, right? Job 38:24 says, "By what way is the light distributed, or the east wind spread over the earth?" So what way is light distributed? Is it the firmament? I don't know. All I'm saying is, if we take the Bible literal, we definitely can like think about what are the possible answers for things with a biblical firmament involved. That's all I'm saying. So, this is definitely just something to like, kind of like a thought thing to kind of stretch your mind a little bit. So, all right, thank you for that one. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're getting something from the series. So next, we're going to take a deeper look into our current cosmology, so the cosmology that you grew up with. And I guarantee you're going to learn something new. And I want you to just prepare yourself and get ready for that cognitive dissonance that we brought up in the first video, because it's going to be big. So prepare yourself, clear your mind, and I promise you, you're going to want to look at that one. You're going to want to listen to the next video. I'll see you there.